life presents us with the undeniable reality that people come and go. Throughout our lives, we build bonds and connections with others, anchoring our emotions to these relationships. These connections come in many forms, from friendships and romantic partnerships to family bonds and professional associations. But what happens when those bonds break? How do you handle the emotional weight when someone no longer occupies the same place in your life, or when you realize they've never shared the same emotional investment? This can lead to profound questions, often causing internal conflict and emotional turmoil. You may wonder, how do I stop caring? Can I truly detach emotionally without losing a piece of myself? This is where Stoicism, particularly the wisdom of Marcus Aurelius, offers guidance. The Stoics were masters at understanding and navigating human emotions, not by ignoring them, but by learning to balance their influence over our lives. Stoic wisdom teaches that emotional detachment doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. It's about regaining the power to act with clarity and inner peace, despite the emotional storms that relationships often bring. In this discussion, I'll guide you through 5 timeless Stoic principles for emotional detachment, using Marcus Aurelius's insights as a beacon. These aren't abstract theories. They're practical steps meant to reshape the way you engage with yourself and others, leading to healthier emotional experiences. Rule 1. Understand the impermanence of life. Marcus Aurelius famously reminds us, everything we hear is an opinion, not a fact. Everything we see is a perspective, not the truth. When it comes to emotional attachments, we often cling to our subjective view of someone, a narrative we create about their importance in our lives. But the reality is that all relationships are transient. One moment someone is close to us, the next, they're gone. This could happen due to physical distance, changing circumstances, or even death. While it may seem bleak, this is the first rule of Stoic detachment. Embrace impermanence. When we realize that no connection is permanent, we start to live more fully in the present moment with those we care about. This doesn't mean we don't cherish our relationships. It means we value them with the awareness that they, like everything else, are subject to change. Have you ever tried holding on to a handful of sand? The tighter you squeeze, the faster it slips away. This is a natural law of life. The more we try to possess or control something or someone, the quicker it fades. In my own life, I had a friendship that lasted over a decade. We shared everything: our dreams, our fears, countless late-night conversations. Yet over time, we grew apart. As much as I resisted, the distance between us increased, and the emotional investment I'd made began to feel like a weight, chaining me to someone who no longer reciprocated the same connection. It wasn't until I accepted that this friendship had run its course that I was able to let go of the emotional burden. Marcus Aurelius would have advised the same. Accept that things will end, and you will suffer less when they do. Embracing impermanence teaches us to appreciate the time we have with others, knowing it's fleeting. This awareness allows us to navigate the inevitable changes in our relationships with grace and resilience. Rule 2. Master your emotions through rational thought. There's a common belief that our emotions control us, that we're helpless in the face of feelings like sadness, anger, and disappointment. But here's a hard truth. Emotions are not reality. They're a product of our thoughts, beliefs, and interpretations. Marcus Aurelius and the Stoics deeply believed in this principle. We are not at the mercy of our emotions. Rather, our emotions are shaped by our thoughts. Marcus taught that our mind holds the power over how we respond to the world, famously saying, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Emotional detachment begins with understanding that we can govern our own emotional state. Your thoughts about someone can either ignite a storm of feelings or calm that same storm. For instance, imagine you're going through a breakup. You're emotionally shattered, replaying conversations in your mind, overanalyzing every detail and asking, "Why did this happen?" Or, "How could they move on so easily?" The Stoic approach is to shift your focus from those emotions to the facts. Instead of giving your emotions control, ask yourself, what are the facts here? How can I think about this differently? Let's consider an example. Suppose you send a heartfelt text to someone you care about, a friend, romantic partner, or family member. Hours pass, and there's no response. Immediately, your mind starts working overtime. Did I say something wrong? Are they mad at me? Do they not care? With every passing moment, your emotions intensify, evolving from slight concern to frustration and perhaps even anger. But what is the truth of the situation? Is it their lack of response that's causing your emotional turmoil, or is it your interpretation of that silence? The Stoic response is to challenge that automatic emotional reaction with rational thought. What are the facts? The fact is that they haven't responded. Everything beyond that is speculation. By pausing and challenging your thoughts, you recognize that your feelings of anxiety or rejection are not rooted in reality, but in your own internal dialogue. Marcus Aurelius's advice is clear. Question your thoughts. Don't just accept them as truth. This rational examination can be transformative. In my own life, I encountered a similar situation with a close friend. We'd been discussing something meaningful, and suddenly they stopped responding. Initially, I thought nothing of it, but as the hours passed, a creeping unease took over. Maybe they're upset with me, I thought. By the end of the day, I'd convinced myself the friendship was on the brink of collapse. But when I stopped to examine what was actually happening, I realized something important. Nothing had happened. My friend had simply been busy. When I reached out calmly the next day, they responded without issue, completely unaware of my emotional turmoil. In that rare moment of clarity, I remembered Marcus Aurelius's words. Focus on what's within your control, your thoughts and actions, not someone else's feelings. By redirecting your mind, you release the emotional turmoil that can weigh you down. Rule 3. Practice negative visualization. Negative visualization may seem like a strange or even counterintuitive practice at first. Why would anyone willingly imagine losing someone they care about? Wouldn't that just add unnecessary stress? In truth, this Stoic exercise, popularized by Marcus Aurelius, is one of the most powerful tools for emotional detachment. Not by hardening our hearts, but by preparing our minds for life's inevitable losses. The idea is both simple and profound. By imagining the worst-case scenario in advance, we reduce its emotional impact if it actually happens. This doesn't mean you become fatalistic or pessimistic. It means you're training yourself to accept reality as it is, rather than how you wish it would be. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Do not disturb yourself by imagining the whole of your life's troubles at once. Rather, as each arises, meet it with calmness and self-control." Negative visualization builds resilience by helping us face the discomfort of loss in our minds before it becomes reality. Imagine someone you're deeply attached to, a partner, a friend, or a family member. Now visualize your life without them. How does that feel? Uncomfortable? Painful? That's exactly the point. The Stoics believed that by confronting the emotional discomfort of loss in your mind, you lessen its ability to devastate you in reality. I remember practicing this during a time when my best friend was considering moving overseas. We'd been inseparable for years, and the thought of them being far away filled me with dread. But instead of suppressing that fear, I embraced it. Every day I imagined what life would be like without their presence. I pictured myself going about my routines, forming new connections and finding joy in new activities. By the time they actually moved, I wasn't blindsided by grief or loneliness. The loss still stung, but I'd already mentally rehearsed it, and that made all the difference. Another dimension of negative visualization is acknowledging that loss is a natural part of life. Everything you cherish will one day be gone, through separation, change, or death. This isn't a morbid thought, but a liberating one. When you stop expecting permanence, you stop feeling entitled to it. And when you stop feeling entitled, the fear of losing it diminishes. Take relationships, for example. When we enter a relationship, we often assume it will last forever. We don't prepare for things to end. But the truth is, nothing is guaranteed. Rather than clinging to a false sense of permanence, the Stoic approach is to appreciate what you have while you have it, knowing it will eventually change. This shift in perspective can be incredibly freeing. I once had a relationship where I was constantly anxious about it ending. The thought of losing that person consumed me, but when I started practicing negative visualization, I stopped obsessing over the possibility of loss. I imagined life after the relationship, and although it was painful, it reminded me to be grateful for the present. When the relationship eventually ended, I found myself more prepared than I'd thought possible. The real gift of negative visualization is that it strengthens your inner resilience. By repeatedly imagining worst-case scenarios, you develop a stability that isn't easily shaken by life's inevitable changes. You learn that no matter what happens, you'll be okay. And that's the ultimate form of emotional detachment. Not from life, but from the illusion that you need things to remain the same to be happy. Rule 4. Focus on what you can control. One of the core teachings of Stoicism, and one of the most empowering realizations you can embrace, is distinguishing between what you can control and what you cannot. When it comes to emotional detachment, this distinction is crucial because so much of our pain in relationships stems from our desire to control things we simply can't. Marcus Aurelius, in his Meditations, emphasizes focusing on what we can control: our thoughts, actions, and responses. Everything else, the behavior of others, the outcomes of situations, the passing of time, is outside our control. The more you try to control what's beyond your influence, the more you suffer. Emotional detachment, then, isn't about becoming indifferent to others. It's about releasing your need to control outcomes you can't dictate. You can't control how someone else feels about you, and this can be a difficult truth to accept. When you're deeply attached to someone, whether it's a romantic partner, friend, or family member, it's natural to want to influence how they feel. You want them to care about you as much as you care about them. But the harsh truth is that you can't control their emotions. You can't make someone love or appreciate you, nor can you force them to treat you as you'd hope. The only thing you control is your response to their actions. Reflect on a time when you tried to influence someone's feelings or behavior. Maybe you went out of your way to prove your worth to a friend who never seemed to value you, or you exhausted yourself trying to earn someone's affection. How did that feel? Likely, it left you frustrated and powerless because you were chasing something beyond your control. In my own life, I was once in a relationship where I felt like I was constantly working to keep things together. No matter how much effort I put into planning thoughtful gestures or being emotionally available, it felt like I was always one step behind. They would pull away and I would try harder, creating a cycle of endless anxiety. When I finally started embracing the Stoic principle of focusing only on what I could control, my own actions and sense of self-worth, I found relief. I couldn't make them love me more or treat me better, but I could control my response, and I chose to let go. The freedom that came from releasing this emotional burden was immense. One of the most liberating things you can do for yourself is to cultivate emotional autonomy, the idea that your happiness, peace, and emotional stability don't depend on anyone else's behavior or feelings. When you place your well-being in someone else's hands, you give away your power, becoming a prisoner to their moods and decisions. Imagine you're in a friendship where you constantly feel overlooked. Your friend doesn't make time for you like they once did, leaving you feeling neglected. Naturally, this hurts, and you might find yourself ruminating on what you did wrong or why they've become distant. But here's the key. Their behavior is outside your control. The only thing within your power is how you choose to respond. Will you spend your energy chasing after someone who doesn't value you, or focus on nurturing relationships and activities that bring you joy? When you shift your attention to what you can control, your emotional state, you reclaim your power. You no longer wait for someone else's validation or attention to feel complete. Instead, you create your own emotional balance, independent of their actions. In my own life, I've had friendships where I realized I was giving too much power to how the other person treated me. If they were distant, I'd feel unworthy. If they were attentive, I'd feel valued. It was an exhausting emotional roller coaster. When I began applying Stoic principles, I made a conscious decision to stop tying my self-worth to others' actions. This didn't mean I cared less. It meant I stopped letting their behavior determine my inner peace. The ultimate goal of emotional detachment isn't indifference, it's acceptance. Acceptance that life is unpredictable, people are unpredictable, and that despite our desire to control everything, we can't. What we can do is accept things as they are, rather than how we wish they would be. Imagine you're going through a breakup. You feel lost and overwhelmed. Your mind races with questions. What if I'd done something differently? Why did this happen? Can I fix it? These are natural thoughts, but they stem from a desire to control what's already past. Instead of tormenting yourself with what-ifs, the Stoic response is to accept the reality of the situation. Marcus Aurelius writes, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." In other words, the obstacles we face are not setbacks, they're opportunities to grow. When you accept what's outside your control, you stop wasting energy trying to change the past or influence others, and start focusing on how you can move forward. During a particularly tough time in my life, I experienced the sudden loss of a relationship I thought was stable. At first, I was consumed by the desire to understand why it ended, what I could have done differently. But slowly, I realized the only way to find peace was to accept it as it was, not as I wanted it to be. I couldn't change the past, and I couldn't control the other person's feelings. What I could control was how I responded. Instead of clinging to what was gone, I embraced the present and found strength in acceptance. Rule 5. Reflect on the bigger picture. When you're deeply entangled in the emotions of a relationship or difficult situation, it's easy to lose perspective. Stoic philosophy, especially the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, encourages us to step back and consider the broader picture. Aurelius often reminded himself that our troubles, fears, and desires are mere fleeting moments in the vastness of time. By adopting this broader viewpoint, emotional detachment becomes easier. Ask yourself important questions like, will this pain matter in 5 years? Or does this person truly define my entire existence? Shifting your focus from immediate emotional turmoil to a higher level of reflection helps you realize that much of your distress is tied to temporary circumstances. Stoicism reminds us that no single person or event should wield such power over our emotional well-being. When you're overly attached to someone, it's easy to make them the center of your universe. Your happiness and self-worth can become entangled with their presence or absence in your life. But stepping back and seeing the bigger picture reminds you that life is ever-changing, and relationships, however intense, are just one part of your journey. You are a complete individual with your own path and experiences. In the heat of a breakup or emotional conflict, it may be challenging to grasp this perspective, but reflecting on the larger scope of your life helps you understand that you've survived emotional storms before. Life moved on, and so did you. Think back to previous relationships or moments when you thought your world was falling apart. Those wounds healed, and you became stronger and wiser. This is the natural rhythm of life. In my own experience, I once went through a painful breakup that felt like the end of my world. For weeks, I fixated on the past, feeling like the future had lost its brightness. But with time, I allowed myself to reflect on the bigger picture and realized that this person, while important, was not the defining moment of my life. They were part of my journey, but not my entire story. By zooming out, I saw the relationship as just one chapter in a much larger narrative, and I began to emotionally detach. The Stoics, particularly Marcus Aurelius, emphasize the impermanence of all things: relationships, emotions, and situations. Everything in life is transient, and what truly matters is how we respond to these inevitable changes. By reflecting on the bigger picture, you cultivate a sense of inner peace, knowing that life will continue to flow regardless of your temporary attachments. This broader perspective allows you to emotionally detach, not because you stop caring, but because you understand that clinging too tightly to fleeting things only leads to unnecessary suffering. Emotional detachment is not about apathy. It's about understanding that life is much larger than any single person, relationship, or moment of pain. By seeing your life as a vast, interconnected web of experiences, you free yourself from the tunnel vision that emotional attachment can create. Ultimately, emotional detachment is not about shutting down your emotions or closing yourself off from the world. It's about building resilience and gaining control over how you respond to life's inevitable changes. The Stoic path offers not a quick fix, but a way to inner peace. By embracing impermanence, mastering your emotions through rational thought, and reflecting on the bigger picture, you will find that emotional detachment is an act of self-liberation. So the next time you feel yourself gripping too tightly to someone or something, ask yourself, do I control my emotions, or do they control me? Emotional freedom awaits those who dare to let go.